Every night, while you sleep, trillions of dollars change hands. Collateral is swapped, repledged, rehypothecated, and then quietly returned before sunrise. No announcements, no press briefings, no oversight. Just the largest nightly wealth transfer on Earth, performed in total silence. It's called the overnight repo market. And if you've never heard of it, that's not an accident. Because inflation isn't the tax. Inflation is the receipt. The real tax? It happens in the dark, every single night. And here's what the financial system doesn't want you to ask. When did the global economy become dependent on a nightly blood transfusion just to survive until breakfast? Let me show you what's actually happening every night. Repo, short for repurchase agreement, is where banks and financial institutions borrow money overnight using collateral. Here's the transaction. Bank A needs cash for 24 hours. Bank A gives Bank B a treasury bond as collateral. Bank B gives Bank A cash. Next morning, Bank A returns the cash plus small interest. Bank A gets the treasury back. Sounds boring, right? Just overnight lending. But here's what makes this sinister. The same treasury bond gets reused multiple times in a single night. It's called rehypothecation. One treasury bond might be used as collateral for 5, 10, even 20 different transactions, all before sunrise. This isn't banking. This is financial musical chairs. And it works fine until the music stops. The system depends on this happening every single night without fail. Miss one night, the system seizes. And that's exactly what's been happening. This nightly ritual didn't exist in the 1950s. It barely existed in the 1960s. The system only needed repo after one decision. August 15, 1971. Nixon closes the gold window. People think this was about defending the dollar. No. This was about freeing the U.S. government to spend without restraint and replacing hard money with flexible credit. Nixon's Treasury Secretary John Connally said it plainly. The dollar is our currency, but your problem. That wasn't sarcasm. That was policy. Here's what actually happened. Before 1971, gold equals money. No gold, no printing. After 1971, treasuries equal collateral. Infinite collateral equals infinite borrowing. You don't need repo when money equals gold. You need repo when money equals IOUs. Because IOUs require constant validation, nightly validation. By 1974, Henry Kissinger had locked in the petrodollar system with Saudi Arabia. Oil trades in dollars. Oil profits get recycled into U.S. treasuries. Treasuries become the world's collateral. This created permanent demand for U.S. debt, which meant permanent liquidity, which meant permanent control. 1971 wasn't a policy shift. It was a financial takeover. And repo became the engine that keeps it running. October 1987, Black Monday. Markets crashed 22% in a single day. And Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan makes a decision that curses every generation after. The Federal Reserve will serve as a source of liquidity to support the economic and financial system. That sentence destroyed capitalism, because it told Wall Street, you never have to take real losses ever again. From that moment, the game changed. Borrow more, leverage more, take bigger risks, because the Fed will always backstop the downside. This is when repo stopped being plumbing and became the central nervous system of finance. Moral hazard only works if the system stays liquid. And to stay liquid, you need nightly collateral operations. You need repo running 24/7, 365. Greenspan didn't create moral hazard intentionally. He was just too scared to say no. And Wall Street exploited that fear for the next 20 years. September 2008, Lehman Brothers collapses. Everyone remembers it as the subprime crisis. Wrong. 2008 was a collateral seizure event. Mortgages didn't kill Lehman. Collateral evaporation did. When mortgage-backed securities stopped being accepted as AAA collateral, the repo market froze. Nothing moved. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. J.P. Morgan was the gatekeeper. They controlled tri-party repo clearing, meaning they decided who gets overnight liquidity, whose collateral is acceptable, and who gets cut off. September 12, 2008. J.P. Morgan demanded $5 billion more collateral from Lehman overnight, knowing Lehman couldn't deliver. If J.P. Morgan had kept the credit line open for 24 hours more, Lehman could have survived long enough for a merger. They didn't. Lehman died not from losses, but from collateral rejection. And after Lehman fell, J.P. Morgan absorbed Bear Stearns for pennies. They consolidated tri-party repo clearing power. They became the unofficial central bank of collateral acceptance. The Fed responded with QE, quantitative easing. The public saw money printing to help homeowners. No. QE was liquidity injection into repo to stop the collateral market from dying. Because if repo dies, treasuries die. And if treasuries die, the dollar dies. So the Fed sacrificed you, through inflation, to save the collateral system. September 16, 2019. No pandemic, no housing bubble, no crash. Markets were calm. And then repo rates spiked from 2% to 10% overnight. 10%. That's not volatility, that's cardiac arrest. And here's the terrifying part. The public didn't know. No headlines, no panic, no press briefings. Because this was the first time in history that U.S. Treasuries, the safest asset on earth, failed to fund properly in the repo market. Even the most pristine collateral was no longer enough. The Fed scrambled in private. Within 48 hours, they injected tens of billions into repo, not to stimulate the economy, but to prevent systemic death. And they framed it as small technical operations to smooth funding conditions. Translation: we almost had a systemic collapse and we're patching it before anyone notices. Then came March 2020. COVID didn't cause the crisis. COVID became the cover story for a crisis that had already started. 2019 repo was the real spark. COVID just gave the Fed political permission to go full synthetic support, forever. QE infinity, zero reserve requirements, unlimited standing facilities. The public saw stimulus checks. The real story? Trillions in repo lubrication to keep the collateral engine running. Because if repo dies, the empire dies. And no empire in history has ever voluntarily given up reserve currency status. So here's where we are. We are not living in capitalism. We are living in collateralism. Your wealth doesn't compete against markets. It competes against collateral. And collateral always wins. Not because it's smarter, not because it's productive, but because the system has been engineered so that your savings are the operating expense for their survival. Every night you sleep, a wealth transfer happens. The biggest tax you pay is not income tax. The biggest tax you pay is not VAT or GST. The biggest tax you pay is the nightly decay of your purchasing power as the system quietly bails itself out again and again before sunrise. You weren't just uninformed about it, you were never supposed to know. So here's the final question. If the system cannot survive even one night without artificial support, is that a financial system or a life support machine that just hasn't been declared dead yet? If this video changed how you see money, share it, because the system depends on you not understanding this. Subscribe if you want to see what they don't want you to see.